up?
What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to Weekly Top 5's from Library Chess Productions. And this time around, we're doing our top 5 games of all time. I'm going to kick things off this time because, as I described to Tyler, this is the mind-bender pick. And we're going to kick it off right away. We waste absolutely no time except for my preamble. My number 5.
Can I guess it?
Can you guess it? Yeah, absolutely.
Bill Lambier's Combat Basketball.
I wish, but...
me too. I was really hoping that would be right.
If I would have played that game more and really gone deep into it, then... Or played it more recently, maybe. My number 5 best game of all time is NHL 18.
Oh, snap, a new one.
And this is why, and don't shut off the video, I've actually got a reason. So most people would probably think that it's ridiculous that I've picked just a pure sports game that really doesn't have any story mode angle to it. Because the sports games now, like the football and basketball, kind of have a storyline angle to it. Yeah. But for the most part, those storylines have been garbage, so that's really not much of a selling point for me. But here's why NHL 18, to me, is the best NHL game of all time, probably the best sports game of all time, and why it's my number 5. Because in terms of the way that I like to do fantasy sports and, just the whole concept of the fantasy draft and being a general manager, it's less playing the game and it's more of creating, it's more team creation and more it scratches my itch for fantasy sports and for management and things like that. And this game gives me everything in that respect that I could ever possibly want. Aside from the fact that NHL 18 introduces what I think is, bar none, the best game mode in years and years and years in that franchise, which is 3's, which is 3-on-3 with a goaltender on each side, and you have money pucks, which can count for multiple goals or taking multiple goals off the board for another team. And it's online competitive play of 3-on-3. If you took away a Hockey Ultimate Team, which is EA's lovely microtransaction concept, but it's addicting, it's super fun. Take all that away, take away the be a pro, strip everything else away from the game except the franchise mode, it's still the best NHL game of all time. Yeah. Because the franchise mode this time around, not only can you do your classic franchise, which is your 31 now NHL teams with the Vegas Golden Knights, you can do your franchise the way you've always been able to, you can also do your expansion draft and be the Vegas Golden Knights. Or you can do an expansion draft with a 32nd franchise. You can literally have 3 to 4 different franchises on the go at the same time. And for somebody like me that plays sports games just as much for the management element of it as for the gameplay element of it, it just scratches every itch I could possibly have for a sports game and a sports management game. So from every angle, NHL 18 to me is the greatest sports game ever made, and that's why it's number 5 on my list.
Got a few things to say about this.
Okay.
One, it's amazing to me that current EA put out something worthy of a top 5 list.
I know, it's
amazing.
It is. It's tremendous.
2, I really like hockey games, but I don't really play them anymore because they're too complicated for me.
Yeah.
I suck.
And that's what I always used to say. I was like, man, I need NHL 10.
Yeah, I just suck at them, but I really like them. And 3, I'm still very much an old school, just play through a season type of guy. Mm-hmm. The management part doesn't really get me going, but I like the NHL games. It surprises me that it was NHL 18, but it doesn't surprise me that an NHL game is on yours because you're such a big sports fan, and we've played NHL 95 so much.
Oh God, that's a great.
I expected that personally.
Right.
He didn't. He did a mind bender. He gave 18.
Exactly.
So moving on, my number 5 is a little game called Final Fantasy VII, which I was actually talking about Final Fantasy VII yesterday to a coworker, and I used to call it the best of the new school Final Fantasies. But then I realized yesterday it's 20 years old. Is it an old school or a new school Final Fantasy? Final Fantasy VII. if you watch our top 5 movies video, then I'm going to repeat myself a little bit here. But Final Fantasy VII is one of those games that's so legendary, so adored, that it's basically overrated by default. Mm-hmm. And yet it's deserving of that. So if someone says it's the most overrated game ever, I could say yes while also saying that it deserves it, which makes no sense.
It's true.
I understand that, but it's true. It's how you can't be one of those games and not kind of have an argument to be also overrated. But you know what? Final Fantasy VII is still great. I played a little bit of it last year. I meant to beat it again, but I just started playing something else.
Right.
Because I don't really replay games a lot anymore. But I played through some of the beginning, and I thought, this is still great. Turn-based combat, some people hate that. I grew up with turn-based combat. I still have a thing for turn-based combat.
Yeah.
The materia system, I thought that maybe that wouldn't hold up. I thought maybe it wouldn't have the depth. But it does. The music, I never doubted that held up, because that's one of the best soundtracks ever. The story, while some of the dialogue in the original, well, I guess it's really the only one that exists now, but it's janky. The dialogue's a little janky.
Yep.
I don't care. It's still a fantastic story. Because, yes, it's still good versus bad, but there's a lot of nuance and intrigue in the characters themselves and their relationships, and one of the cool plot twists in gaming.
Yeah. But remember that quote about all great stories boil down to the hero's journey.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah, I mean, it's a good versus evil. It's fine. And the last thing I'll say is that while the graphics certainly don't hold up, old block hands.
Oh, yeah.
But you know what?
No mouths, block hands.
Back in 1997, we were like, this is awesome.
Right, exactly.
And I don't like to really look back at games and say, the graphics suck now. I understand that they kind of do, because PlayStation 1 and N64 were that weird time of transitioning to like 3D graphics. Right. But the backdrops of FF7 and stuff are still awesome. It's just the character models themselves. Yeah, a little crappy now, but it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter, because everything else is so great.
Right.
So there you are. FF7 is my number 5.
That's a good pick, and I like it.
Yeah, I don't think that's gonna be on your list.
No, you'll never hear from that game again.
I don't think that's number 1.
Shh. My number 4 best game of all time is where we're going to begin. Basically,
a descent into madness.
Yes, exactly. No, we're going to begin like the genre train, and that's all that I'm going to say. I'm literally just going to stop it right there.
Yeah.
My number 4 best game of all time is The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. And I can't, for all the things that people say about Bethesda games, oh, these games are so great, but the longer you play them, the jankier they become, and they break, and for everything that people say about Skyrim in particular, the fact that it's the first game since probably Final Fantasy VII, actually, that I've put in excess of 120 hours into, it's undeniable that it has to be there, and it's undeniable that that game has struck a chord with me. It's not just, I've been wandering around Skyrim for 120 hours. Like, no, I've been actively invested in that game for over 120 hours of my life. And to hardcore gamers, that's meaningless. But to me, I'm not a hardcore gamer, right? So the fact that I have invested 120 hours into that game speaks to how much I love that game. And like, I mean, look, open world games are basically, I don't want to say a dime a dozen, because it sounds like I'm degrading.
No, they're a dime a dozen. I'll say it.
Yeah, right, there you go. Exactly. See, the hardcore gamer can say it, but like I realize that they are, and that they happen a lot, and that Skyrim is not the best of them. Like, I mean, I'm if I had to hazard a guess, I would think maybe there's at least one on your list that is better than Skyrim.
Oh yeah.
But that was my, like, that's just like, I go into that game and I can lose a day. I'm so happy that that game has been so enduring, that it's gotten, remakes. Oh, next console up, got to remake Skyrim. New Nintendo console, got to port Skyrim over to it. Like, I mean, and that's always makes me so happy, because that's a testament that a game that I love is also loved by so many other people, and there's still such an appeal to play that game. And yeah, I mean, I've put so much time into Skyrim, and I really, really do love that game, and maybe that makes me a Bethesda lover or whatever it makes me in the hardcore gaming community. But I don't know why I did
I just want to be smug.
the little D'Lo Brown handshake there. But Elder Scrolls Skyrim is my number 4.
Yeah, you're like me. I mean, I play a lot of games, but I don't put hundreds of hours into any game. As much as I love them, I just don't do that. I don't want to spend hundreds of hours. So for you to do that is a big deal to you, as it would be to me, because even my favorite games of all time, I haven't put hundreds of hours into. I just love them for what they are, and then I generally move on. I got some beef with Skyrim, but I like Skyrim. I like Skyrim quite a bit. It has one of my favorite leveling systems in all of RPGs, but gaming.
Right.
I just like that you do stuff and it levels up. It seems like such a simple premise, but so many games don't do it. Mm-hmm. While I think it's slightly overrated, I still really enjoy it, and it's hugely important. And so Skyrim's a good pick. It's not on mine, but not even close to being on mine. But I do really like Skyrim.
I would have been shocked if it was on yours, and that's not to represent you as someone who hates Skyrim, but just reflective of the number of games that you play.
Yeah, I remember I considered buying Skyrim on the Switch, which I generally wouldn't consider, but I thought, geez, that would be fun on the Switch. Mm-hmm. All right, my number 4 is actually a game that I'm pretty sure he alluded to, but my number 4 is Witcher 3. This is hard for me because I kind of wanted to put Witcher 3 in number 3. Like, I could switch 4 and 3 and be content with either.
Totally.
Witcher 3 was the first game in a long time, and also the last game to get me so invested in it that I happened to have 4 days off from work. It just happened that way, so I could play it for 4 days straight, and I just sat there and I played all the time. Because I don't do that. I play games, but I'm not one of these staying up all night playing 10 hours. I'm not that anymore. But with Witcher 3, I played it so much over those days, and then I beat it, and then I got finished, and I didn't know what to do with my life. I forgot how to life. And I haven't felt like that in so long with a game. Actually, since my number 1, which will come up later. It does the open world better than Skyrim. The combat's better than Skyrim, although some people don't like it, but I enjoy the Witcher combat. The leveling up isn't as deep as Skyrim, but it's good enough. It's good enough to be a good RPG system, which is what I want. But where Witcher 3 excels, well, 2 things. Music's fantastic. Witcher 3 is so good. The story is so good. Your decisions matter. It's emotional. It's deep. The side quests have more meat to them than the main quests in almost every other game. Like, The Witcher 3, this will also be one of those games like Skyrim that people are now so overrated. But they're less, they're more hesitant to call it overrated because people still love CD Projekt Red.
Yes.
But if they come out and do some wonky crap with, their new game, Cyberpunk, or, start going some Bethesda or EA route, then people will turn on Witcher 3 real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, Witcher 3 is my number 4. I almost said my number 3.
You almost said it just because it would have rolled off
my number 3
so nicely. And what game did I just buy on PS4?
Witcher 3.
There you go. My number 3 best game of all time is actually a game that has the number 3 in the title, but only in North America. This is Final Fantasy VI. And except in North America, where it was Final Fantasy III, and all kinds of nomenclature confusion ensues, because whenever you say Final Fantasy III, you're like, which game is that? The story of Locke and Celis and Terra.
And almost every character, because every character is really good in that game.
Exactly, really good and basically integral to the primary story. The last good time with Super Nintendo before Final Fantasy jumped on the Sony train and went to PlayStation and got all graphical. Final Fantasy VI is such an incredible game. The story to it is tremendous in that it starts off feeling very small, and then it just grows and grows and grows and hits its crescendo. And that's the halfway point of the game is when that story hits its crescendo. And then the game within the game begins of trying to rebuild. And it's that is one of my earliest memories of being crushed, basically losing in a video game, but having your opportunity to redeem yourself because you lose in that game at about the halfway point. You lose super hardcore. Really, really, really well built. I know we always used to love, especially in high school, having the conversations of which characters paired off with which, because we always want to place those romantic stories in there, and we will defend those romantic stories and the not so romantic stories because we certainly have our ideas about a specific character and what happens in a dungeon. One of the best villains in the series, maybe the best villain in the series.
Yeah,
like, would you put Kefka as like probably the
kind
top?
of depending on what you want, right? If you went deliciously evil, then yes.
Right.
If you went with a little bit of depth, probably not. But he's deliciously evil, and sometimes that's okay with a villain.
Yeah, it's just such a tremendous game from like the start, which I know you have a very complicated relationship with because you played it so much, all the way up to the end of that game, which is one of the best boss fights to end a game. So Final Fantasy VI is my number 3, and it's incredible.
Hey, guess what? That's my number 3.
Is it really? Sweet.
I love this game. This is the best of the old school Final Fantasy, I guess. He mentioned the beginning, and the reason that I got a complicated relationship is because I played it so much. Because we used to rent games back in the day.
Yeah.
And you had to hope that they didn't save over your file the next people that rented it. And they always did.
They always did, of course.
So I had to keep renting it, and I kept playing the beginning over and over. Now I can't. And I can't get through it, but the beginning is excellent. I just can't do it anymore. Dude, the game's open world. On Super Nintendo, like the World of Ruin is an open world game. Once you get the airship.
Absolutely.
You just get the airship and then you could go fight Kefka if you wanted.
Right, it's true.
You don't want to. But
you don't want to do that.
You can go around and find all these neat things. And I remember the first time flying through the air in my airship in the World of Ruin, and then you get attacked by a boss. You're just flying around. You're like, what's going on? Like, the World of Ruin is so full of mystery. And really, even the World of Balance, I think it's called. That too, but World of Ruin especially has so much going on. There's Go-Go, who may or may not have a deep backstory. I love the theories on Go-Go.
I do too.
Even though he's probably just some guy with cool moves. There's things you miss, like, if you don't go sleep in a certain inn with Shadow, you won't see his dreams because he has dreams at a certain inn that flesh out his character. There's so many secrets in that game, legitimate secrets that really add to the experience. And yeah, Final Fantasy VI, one of the best soundtracks in gaming. The visuals still hold up today because Super Nintendo had this thing where they perfected that type of graphic.
Yeah,
and they hold up today, unlike, like I said, PS1. Yeah, so Final Fantasy VI. Is a very excellent Final Fantasy.
I'm so happy that we've already in our recording session today already hit something that was the same number for both of us.
Yeah,
it makes me very happy. My number 2 best game of all time for the second one in a row is a game that has the number 2 in its title, which I honestly didn't plan it this way, but it's just happened to be the way that the coins fell. My number 2 best game is, I'm going to try to pronounce this right, Suikoden 2.
Or Suikoden, as we used to say until our friend who knew Japanese kept correcting us.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, it always used to be. Suikoden or Suikoden, I guess, or whatever. So Suikoden 2 was my first exposure, I think, to like just how deep games like this can get with their characters. Because I mean, there's so many. Because I didn't really play the first one. I picked it up. I remember renting it, and I picked it up and I played it, and I was like, I'm not really into this. And then saw the second one, and I was like, I'm gonna try this, see if the second one's better. And man, I love the second one so much more than the first one. But there's just so many characters, and they all have a story, and they all contribute to the larger story of like building this kingdom. And again, it goes right back to scratching my itch for like not fantasy sports, but it scratches my itch for like management and like building something. And I think that may be one of the things, like one of the elements that makes this game so special for me, because I can, it's my mission to find as many of these characters as humanly possible on my own without trying to use a strategy guide or trying to figure out like when specifically I have to do certain things, because if I don't, then I won't get this character or things like that. And it was my first exposure to really how deep games like that can be. I thought it had a great villain, a great couple of villains actually, and I loved the story. I loved the silent protagonist. I mean, there's no voice acting or anything, but the protagonist never speaks. The only speaking is like your choices of things that you pick through quote unquote dialogue, but your character never actually says anything. I love the relationship between that character and Jowie, his childhood best friend, and his sister, and it's just such an intriguing story, and there's so many interesting secondary and tertiary characters of such a complete game. So Suikoden 2 is my number 2 best game of all time.
Yeah, it's interesting how that series incorporates 2 different types of games.
Right.
I never beat the second one. I played it a fair bit. I did beat the first one, so I always stick with the first one as my favorite, but I don't think I'd argue that the second is actually better. It's just I didn't play it as much.
Right.
So that's a good pick. Not unexpected, but I forgot all about your love for it. But I remember, he's talked about that game a lot, and he loves that game. And I also really like that game. It's just not in my top 5.
Right.
All right, and my number 2 is the end of the RPG fest for me, because all of my games have been RPGs, because I've said before on a podcast of his years ago, there's nothing better than a good RPG.
No, exactly.
Except for one thing, which is my number 1. But my number 2 is Parasite Eve. Which is really the only odd pick in my list, I think, because while Parasite Eve is certainly liked by people, you don't always expect for somebody to say, hey, my second favorite game is Parasite Eve. Because it kind of came along and people enjoyed it and then moved on, right? There was Parasite Eve 2, it wasn't as good. There was a PSP game, which I never played because I didn't have a PSP. An RPG does something neat with the turn-based formula that you can't actually move around, but it's still technically kind of turn-based.
Yep. Parasite
Eve started my love of, well, Parasite Eve. I've seen the movie since that it's based on, even though the movie's a lot different than the game. Yeah. I own the book, which is more like the movie. Well, the movie's more like the book. So quite a bit different from the game. The game's kind of, I think, more of a spiritual successor, I suppose, to the book and movie.
Okay.
But I think it is one of the all-time great stories, and that's pretty much what I'm saying about all these games, because they're all RPGs and stories so heavy. But I love the science of it. It's still technically a good versus evil, but it was an interesting spin of the way it deals with like mitochondria, and some people would criticize being like it's pseudoscience. Well, yeah, but it's still based in science, and it's fun. It's fiction. It's a fictional story. So what they did was they took this very real thing, mitochondria, and did something neat with it to create a wonderful fiction. It doesn't have to be this hard science. Fiction. Everything is real.
Yeah, exactly.
Pseudoscience, it's fine. It's a video game. It was cool that it was rooted in reality. I'll never forget when I fell in love with that game. From the opening moments.
Damn.
Seriously. But so you're there, you go, and everything starts burning. And I thought, this is a real cool beginning, that I'm now watching everything burn. People are running for their lives, and there's this girl on stage going, woo, and everything's burning around.
It's true.
This is neat. I like this.
The visual of that is great.
Exactly. But what really got me was, I was just, like, let's do this. I gotta go see what's going on. I'm a cop. So she jumps down a hole, and she's going down this hall, and it cuts to this video scene, which the video scenes are still cool today.
Yeah.
But back then, they were really good. And this rat rolls up, and you're like, oh, it's a rat. And then it starts turning inside out. And I was like, what's going on? And the game scared me so much. It was a horror RPG, and it actually terrified me. The final battle, or after the final battle in the game, when you're running away from the ultimate being, that music is dun 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 dun, and it's just like, leave me alone. I always call Parasite Eve my favorite game that isn't the series that's number 1. And it's the best RPG. As good as the other RPGs are, Parasite Eve is one of the few RPGs that I can still go back to today and really, really love. Because it's not a 40-hour RPG time sink. I think I beat it in 15 hours or less.
Yeah, I think most by most standards, it's like 15 to 20 hours.
Yeah, it's just a nice condensed, good game with good pacing and excellent everything. So I really wish Parasite Eve could come back, but I don't think there's a whole lot of demand for it. And I don't know that they do it well anyway at this point, but...
Well, that would be the question.
But number 2.
Question number 2. It's time now for the most predictable pick in this top 5.
If you know him.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know that it's the most predictable, but it's certainly predictable for you.
Well, you know, yeah.
I think you and I are tied for number 1.
I would say so.
Thank you.
But my number 1 best game of all time is a game that he mentioned earlier, and it's Final Fantasy VII. And it's the... I know, dun dun dun.
What?
What a quelle surprise. I still am so infatuated with that game, and it was my sole reason for buying a PS1, because I was like, man, this game looks incredible. I want this system because I need to play this game.
Yep.
So I got it, and I got the game with it. I got them all at the same time. So it was the first thing that was ever placed into my PS1.
Yep.
And to be perfectly honest, if I wasn't an idiot and put my PS1 on the floor a time or two and burnt out the laser, I would probably still have my PS1 just to play that game if it was still operational. Because I will just go back to that game again and again and again, and I know from the second that I turn that game on, I'm going to be like, look, this is going to be 40 to 50 hours that I'm going to love as much as the first time that I played it. The turn-based combat, like you kind of mentioned when you talked about it, that doesn't bother me one little bit. Some people, it's just like, turn-based combat, gross, get it away from me. And I guess I get that, but maybe just due to the generation of gamers that we were, and still, I guess, are, that doesn't bother us at all, because we're like, just like, this is good times. This reminds me of good times. The materia system is still great. I still love that villain. I still love that story. I love the main character. I love the theories behind certain characters and the shipping of the certain relationships between certain characters, because that's what we did back in the day. The hell, that's still what they do now. Final Fantasy VII is probably the first game that I could say I legitimately loved, but it still holds up as my number 1 game of all time.
You know, I went to my cousin's shortly after that game came out, and she had a PlayStation 1, and being a big Final Fantasy fan since the first one, I was like, can we rent Final Fantasy VII? And we did, and I feel kind of bad because all I really wanted to do was play that.
Right.
I got so invested, me and my friend got so invested in it, so I don't remember how far we got, but we didn't want it to end, so then we had to leave, so I never got to beat it then. But I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, but we may have gotten it on the same Christmas. I think we did.
I think we did.
It is when we used to talk on the phone. I remember us talking, like, where are you now? Where are you? Oh, I'm here. And it was like a big deal. Where are you in this game now? And it was like real exciting to just talk about that. And we really haven't ever done that since.
I don't think so,
but,
no.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VII is obviously a very special game. So, and not at all unexpected.
Exactly. No way anybody would have been able to figure that out. No way, no how. I know what his number 1 is. I didn't even see it on the list. I just know what it is.
But I'm gonna call him out and ask him to guess which one it is. But before he does, just know I am representing an entire series with one game. So my whole top 5 isn't the series.
Ooh, no. I have to audible. Because it's not, from him saying that, it's not the one that I think it was.
What?
It's not. So, what I was going to say that it was Breath of the Wild, but it's not.
Damn. No.
Because I know you love that game.
Yeah.
But it's not that. It's one of the Metal Gear games.
How did you even doubt that?
Well, I figured maybe it would have been number 2. But now
my bestie doesn't know me.
No, I do know you because I thought it was Zelda. So okay, so now the challenge is, which one is it?
I'll give you a hint. It's not Metal Gear Solid 5.
Okay, fair enough. I'm going to go with Snake Eater.
No. So it's Metal Gear Solid 4.
Not. I was close. Snake Eater's 3, isn't it?
Yeah, you were close.
Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, I'm a huge Metal Gear guy. It's my jam. It has been since Metal Gear Solid, although I did play a little of like NES ones. But I know how butchered that was. But I was younger. I mostly watched my brother play those. I came into my own with Solid and have been a gigantic fan of the series since. Metal Gear Solid 4 is kind of a tale of two games because the first, I'm going to say half, but it might not even be half, has really good gameplay that I think that improved on the third one. It took some of the elements of the camouflage and improved the way it worked and made it a little less janky. Then the last half is just more story, gigantic cutscenes that it got criticized for, but also loved. You don't play it as much as earlier, which it kind of seems like a problem with the game, but you know what? I'm so invested in that story that I could have watched that entire game and still loved it. I was so into it. Trying to make this story real quick, but with the same ex that I mentioned earlier, I was job hunting because I didn't have a job. And the weekend came when that game was being released, and I said, I need the weekend to play Metal Gear. All I need is the weekend. I'll job hunt after. And so I did. So anytime she went to work, I just played until she got home. It was like 10 hours. Yeah, so when you're actually playing it, it is really awesome. And I was really invested in the story, like I said. It has some of the greatest moments in the entire series. Returning to Shadow Moses is the all-time best moment in game ever because of what Metal Gear Solid 1 did and how it built Snake's character and his relation to Shadow Moses Island, and that facility. And they throw cool things like you get to pilot a Metal Gear and fight another Metal Gear. What? Like, that's ridiculous. But yeah, I'm a huge Metal Gear nut, and Metal Gear Solid 4 is my favorite, although I would really accept any of them, because any of them could be there. Metal Gear Solid 3 might objectively be a better game. I don't know, but Metal Gear Solid 4 was that one for me that made me blubber a lot, and even though the story gets a little ridiculous with nano machines, everything's nano machines, I still love it. Cool. The game is so good.
Well, there you go. Like I was so set on Breath of the Wild being your number one. I was kind of waiting for a Metal Gear game to come up, and then I suppose I should have clued in when it didn't. But yeah, and then when you started talking about like it's representative of the whole series, I was like, well, I don't think he likes the rest of the Zeldas that much.
No, but Breath of the Wild is awesome. Right. It's so good.
So cool. So there you go. I was a little bit off base, but I pulled it back. Friendship canceled. Yeah. YouTube channel canceled.
Of all things, Metal Gear. Like, it was Metal Gear.
Again? Like, I was waiting for it. I was waiting for it to show up, and it didn't show up. And I was like, what's going on here? All right, folks, that's going to do it for another weekly Top 5. Like, comment, subscribe, follow us down here, and we'll see you next week.